Hello friends, welcome to a lecture on nature and scope of educational psychology and need for psychological approach in education. Objectives: to get familiar with the meaning of educational psychology, to know about the nature and scope of educational psychology, to get an insight in need of psychological approach in education. Let's discuss about educational psychology. The term educational psychology is the combination of two words, education and psychology. The earliest definition of psychology was that it is the study of soul. Etymologically, the term psychology means the study of soul on account of its derivation from two Greek words, psyche and logos. The former meaning soul and the later science of study of the term soul was too vague and ambiguous. There was complete controversy about the nature of soul, its place in the body. According to Aristotle, life had no meaning without soul, but he was unable to explain the true nature of soul. Psychology was redefined as science of mind and was held as a branch of mental philosophy. Although the word mind was less vague and mysterious than soul, yet it also faced the same question. William Wundt and his disciple Edward Bradford also concluded to define psychology as a science of consciousness. According to these psychologists, the description and explanation of the state of consciousness is the task of psychology, which is usually done by the process introspection. Intro means inward, within, and spection means looking. This definition was also rejected on the grounds that it has a very narrow vision on account of it's not talking about the subconscious and unconscious activities of mind. The unconscious has an important impact on our behavior. It proved most subjective and unscientific method. It could not include the study of consciousness of animals. William McDougall, an outline of psychology, defined psychology as psychology is a science which aims to give us better understanding and control of the behavior of the organism as a whole. Thus, in the ultimate analysis, psychology is the science of behavior, taking behavior in widest possible sense. Behavior is the total response of an organism to situation of life. Any manifestation of life is activity, says Woodworth, and behavior is collective name of these activities. Round the clock, whatever an organism does, any activity, consciously, subconsciously and unconsciously. Behavior relates broadly to three domains: cognitive, affective, conative. It is concerned with all segments of human mind, conscious, subconscious and unconscious. When we talk about the study of behavior in psychology, we mean to study the behavior of humans, animals, birds and insects. In nutshell, the term behavior refers to the entire life activities and experiences of all living organisms. N.L. Moon says, psychology today concerns itself with the investigation of behavior. Jackson writes, psychology can be broadly defined as the investigation of human and animal behavior and of the mental and psychological processes associated with the behavior. Watson says, psychology is a positive science of behavior. Crow and Crow, psychology is the study of human behavior and human relationships. Skinner writes, psychology is the science of behavior and experiences. Thus, Psychology studies all the shades of experiences, mental processes, and behaviors. In some, psychology is the scientific study of human and animal behavior. Education is an activity which goes on in the society. It attempts to develop the personality of an individual and then prepares him for membership in a society. Man without education would still be living just like an animal. It is education which transforms man from two-legged animals into human. It helps him to behave like a man and prevents him from behaving like an animal. Any modification brought about in the behavior of an individual as a result of his interaction with environment constitutes learning. Thus, modification of behavior of an individual for healthy social adjustment in the society is education. Thus, educational psychology is just specialized branch of general psychology and is a science which studies actual events in a scientific way and deals with the behavior of human beings in educational situations. This means that educational psychology is concerned with the study of human behavior or human personality, its growth, development under the social guidance process of education. Now, let's discuss about nature of educational psychology. Educational psychology is scientific in nature as it has been accepted that it is science of education. The nature of educational psychology can be summarized in the following manner. Educational psychology is a scientific in nature. In science, collection of data, observation of facts, and its verification of any phenomenon are possible by any number of persons at any period of life. Educational psychology is a natural science. An educational psychologist conducts its investigations, gathers data and reaches its conclusion in exactly the same manner as the physicist. Educational psychology is a positive science rather than a normative science. It is not concerned with what ought to be, why and what type of education to child, rather emphasizes how, when and where of education. Educational psychology is an applied science. The action of educational psychology is to be found not in the nature of subject itself but rather in its application in the classroom. Education psychology is narrower in the nature because it deals with delimitations. Here the study of behavior is concerned in educational settings. Educational psychology is human experimental psychology. Educational psychology is closely related to human experimental psychology, particularly in the study of learning. Educational psychologists deals with all the psychological aspects of the educational process. Educational psychology is a social science. Social psychologists study humans who interact frequently if not continually, with each other and live in groups, ranging from the family to the society. Social psychologists are concerned with the effect of the group, whether family, peer, professional, cultural, social, upon the individual and vice versa. Educational psychology is a counseling psychology. We use the word counseling to refer to the functions of psychologists whose principal job is to deal with the people who are in need of help or advice but not primarily who have emotional difficulties. Educational psychology is an educational science. General psychology may be considered as the primary behavior science. The domain of educational psychology is confined to educational problems and the behavioral problems of individuals in educational situations. Educational psychology is concerned with the human factor in learning. It is a field in which concepts derived from experimental work is psychological. Laboratories are applied to education, but it is also a field in which experimentation is carried out to test the applicability of such concepts to education and to round out the study of topics of crucial interest to teachers. Dear students, let's see scope of educational psychology. Scope means the limits of the particular subject in the field of its operations. What is to be included in the study or what subject matter does it contain comes under its scope. Educational psychology, as discussed so far, deals with the behavior of the learner in educational situations only. Therefore, it becomes imperative that educational psychology should limit itself within the four walls of teaching learning process and educational environment. It must try to solve the problems evolving in actual teaching learning situations and help the individual involved in this process. A famous psychologist, Lindgren, points out that educational psychology is concerned with understanding the learner, the learning process, and the learning situation. 5 major areas covered by educational psychology may be as the learner, pupil, the learning process, the learning situation, the learning experience, the teacher. The learner. The term learner applies to students who individually or collectively participate in the educational programs. These students taken collectively constitute the class. In fact, the behavior of the class is none other than the behavior of the students. There can be no teaching without there being a learner. The teaching of Latin without the knowledge of John will not be effective. Two learners of the same age differ from one another in number of ways when one has a liking for music and dislike for mathematics. And science, another may have dislike for music and liking for mathematics and science. Not only motivation but also developmental characteristics, personality, mental health, individual differences, intelligence, etc. of the learner come under the scope of educational psychology. The learning process. Learning is the process by which we acquire and retain attitudes, knowledge, understanding, skills and capabilities that cannot be attributed to inherited behavior patterns or physical growth. Capacity for learning is related to innate psychological factors. Rate of learning depends on both inherited and environmental factors. Each type of learning goes by different names. For example, effective learning has to do with feelings and values and therefore influences our attitude and personalities. Cognitive learning is achieved by mental process such as reasoning, remembering and recall. The learning situation. It is difficult to imagine any period of life's situations when we are not learning something, even though we are not always aware that we are learning. While walking down a street on any ordinary day, we continually modify our behavior in response to environment. Thus, learning situation covers all life experiences that modify our behavior. From academic point of view, learning situation refers to the classroom setting, which is composed of pupils, a teacher and a room. all have a unique characteristic behavior of teachers, pupils, and classroom environment contribute to the learning. The learning experience. Although education psychology does not connect itself directly with the problem of what to teach or what learning experiences are to be provided for the learner, yet it has the full responsibility of suggesting techniques of acquiring the learning experiences. Once the task of educational philosophy is to decide the aims and objectives of a pace of instructions at a particular stage is finished, the need of educational psychology is felt. The teacher. It is not enough for a carpenter to be good at sawing, planing and polishing wood, because every kind of wood has different characteristics and behaves in different ways under his tools. The skilled carpenter needs to know about trees, their variety, their characteristics, and how to make the best use of them. So is with the teacher. Teaching skills are not sufficient. He must understand the children as learners. He must try to recognize those characteristics that are of significance in helping each child to learn more effectively. And finally, let's trace the need for psychological approach in education. In the words of E.A. Peel, educational psychology helps the teacher to understand the development of his pupils, the range and limits of their capacities, the processes by which they learn, and their social relationships. In this way, the work of educational psychologists resembles with that of engineer, who is a technical expert. The engineer supplies all the knowledge and skill essential for the accomplishment of the job satisfactorily, for example, construction of the bridge. In the same way, educational psychologist, who is a technical expert in the field of education, supplies all the information, principles, techniques essential for understanding the behavior of the people in response to the educational environment and desired modification of his behavior to bring an all-round development of his personality. In this way, it is quite reasonable to call educational psychology as the science and technology of education. Thus, educational psychology concerned primarily with understanding the process of teaching and learning that takes place within formal environment and developing ways of improving those methods. It covers important topics like learning theories, teaching methods, motivation, cognitive and emotional moral development of the learner, and congenial parent-child relationships, etc. Behavioristic psychology. Behavioristic approach is the analysis of how learning occurs based upon rewards and punishments. It studies the objective, observable environmental influence on behavior and treating people with overt problems. Some of its contributions to education are behaviorism, revolutionized all the programs and methods related to education. Behaviorism advocates the use of reinforcement and reward in the place of punishment and unpleasant behavior as inducement for the acquisition of desirable behavior and for giving up the undesirable behavior. It highlighted the role of motivation and environment in shaping and modifying the behavior of children. Behaviorism gave rise to new ideas and innovations in the field of learning and instructions like programmed learning. Psychodynamic School of Psychology. Psychodynamic approach is based on the belief that childhood experiences greatly influence the development of later personality traits and psychological problems. Some of its contributions to education are: psychodynamic approach gave an impetus to the moment of early childhood education, incorporating the giving of maximum freedom to children for expression of their biological urges and minimal interference in the course of their natural growth and development. The discovery of the unconscious and its importance in determining behavior has helped in determining the cause of behavioral deviations. In education, this has helped in understanding the children and the taking of all possible precautionary measures for preventing their becoming maladjusted personalities. Freud's system of psychoanalysis has called the provision of proper extracurricular activities and suitable hobbies, etc., in the school programs for the release of repressed or blocked libidinal energy and pent-up feelings. Freud's emphasis on the role of sex in one's life has brought out the necessity of providing proper sex education to children. Humanistic psychology. Humanistic approach emphasizes on individual freedom in directing one's future. This approach developed in part as a result of Maslow's dissatisfaction with psychoanalysis and behaviorism. According to this approach, all individuals strive to grow, develop and move towards self-actualization. It stresses on free will, self-actualization, and the human nature is naturally positive and growth-seeking. Some of its contributions to education are: humanistic psychology includes several approaches to counseling and therapy. Humanistic psychology theory of Abraham Maslow, emphasizing a hierarchy of needs and motivation. Humanistic psychology is centered on the student's capacity for self-direction and understanding of their own development. Humanistic psychology offers a new set of values for approaching and understanding of human nature and the human conditions. It offers a broader range of more effective methods in the professional practice of psychotherapy. Cognitive psychology. Cognitive approach focuses on how we process, store and use information. It emphasizes on perception, memory, imagery, concept formation, problem solving, reasoning, decision making and language. It focuses on information processing approach, gathering information, processing it and producing a response. Some of its contributions to education are: cognitive psychology helps us to know how people acquire, process and store information. There are numerous practical applications of cognitive psychology, such as ways to improve memory, how to increase decision-making accuracy, and how to structure educational curriculum to enhance learning. Teachers, educators, and curriculum designers can be benefited by learning more about how people process, learn, and remember information through cognitive psychology. With the work of Jean Piaget and influential cognitive psychologists, educators, and psychologists have gained deeper insight in students' learning and the way in which the testing of misperceptions help young people refine their thinking and eventually arrive at more objective truth. Engineers, scientists, artists, architects and designers can all benefit from understanding mental states and processes. Neurobiological psychology. Neurobiological approach emphasizes on sensation, perception, learning, memory, language, sexuality and abnormal behavior. It focuses on genetic and biological processes in the brain and other part of the nervous system. It studies the structure and function of nerve cells, the brain and the nervous system and how this contributes to behavior. Some of its contributions to education are: this is scientific approach to learning that relates behavior to the electrical and chemical events taking place inside the body. It emphasizes the need to understand activities within the brain and nervous system together, their effect upon behavioral and mental process. It also enables the teacher to decide on how to attract and maintain attention, since it provides an understanding of how the brain functions, including channels of communication and processing of information. That's all about today's lecture. Hope you have enjoyed and understood. Thank you and goodbye.